NBA YoungBoy performed an entire tour after a doctor warned him about his heart, and almost nobody knew. NBA YoungBoy just revealed something about his health that should make every fan stop and listen.
Music is not something that I'm focused on. The doctor told me the left side of my heart was swollen. That explains the music though, right?
During an interview with Funny Marco, YoungBoy casually revealed that a doctor told him the left side of his heart was swollen. But here's what makes this story disturbing. He didn't tell anybody. He didn't cancel the tour. He didn't walk away from the stage. According to YoungBoy, he kept performing and finished the entire tour while dealing with the condition. Think about that. One of the biggest rappers in the world was apparently dealing with a serious health concern, and instead of stopping, he kept going like nothing happened. And what's even more surprising is that this wasn't the only thing YoungBoy said in the interview that raises questions about his health and the way he's been living. He talked about barely making music anymore. He talked about wanting to tour only one more time. He talked about wanting to stay away from the spotlight. And most importantly, he kept coming back to the same thing: his children and the life he wants to have outside of music. So why would someone who has already accomplished so much continue pushing himself like this? And is NBA YoungBoy finally realizing that the life he built might be costing him more than people realize? Because this interview wasn't really about music. It was about a young man who may be starting to understand that his health is more valuable than his career. And once you hear everything he said, you'll understand why this moment deserves a lot more attention. Let's get into it. So today, we're not talking about YoungBoy's music. We're not talking about his beats. We're not talking about his fame. We're talking about something much more important: NBA YoungBoy's health and the dangerous mindset of pushing yourself even when your body is telling you to stop. The moment almost passed casually during the interview. Funny Marco asked YoungBoy about performing back-to-back shows and whether there was ever a moment when he felt like it was becoming too much. And that's when YoungBoy dropped the revelation. He explained that a doctor had told him that the left side of his heart was swollen. But instead of stopping, he kept performing. He finished the entire tour, and he said he never told anybody. Think about that for a second. This wasn't YoungBoy saying he was tired. This wasn't him saying he needed a vacation. He was describing something a doctor had apparently identified involving his heart, and his response was basically, keep going. That mentality is one of the biggest themes throughout YoungBoy's career. Here's the complicated part. The same mentality that can make somebody successful can also become dangerous. YoungBoy has always had this reputation for working through pain. Don't stop, don't complain, don't depend on anybody. Keep moving. And that mentality clearly helped him survive some incredibly difficult periods in his life. But there's a difference between being mentally strong and ignoring what your body is telling you. Your body doesn't care about your album sales. It doesn't care about your tour schedule. It doesn't care how many fans are waiting outside the venue. And it definitely doesn't care whether you're considered one of the biggest artists in the world. If your body needs rest, it needs rest. This is where the interview becomes even more interesting. YoungBoy said one of his favorite memories of performing was being on stage and knowing that his children were somewhere watching him. That's beautiful, but it also makes the health revelation more serious. Because now the question isn't simply, can YoungBoy keep performing? The question is, how long can he keep pushing himself before the cost becomes too high? He has children who need him. He has people who love him. He has an entire life outside of music. And yet he's describing a period where his health apparently raised a serious concern, and he still decided to finish what he started. That's dedication. But it can also be dangerous. What's fascinating is that YoungBoy doesn't even sound obsessed with music anymore. During the interview, he said music isn't where his heart is right now. He barely records. He talked about having only 1 or 2 albums left. He even said he expects to tour one more time throughout his life. That's important, because maybe YoungBoy is beginning to realize something. Asterisk, asterisk, you can't spend your entire life sacrificing yourself for the career that gave you everything. At some point, you have to ask what you're actually living for. And YoungBoy repeatedly brought the conversation back to his children. There's another part of the interview that connects directly to this. YoungBoy talked about how fame affects his mental state. He admitted that sometimes seeing other artists and thinking about their level of success can make him feel bad about himself. That's another side of fame people don't talk about. You can accomplish things that millions of people will never accomplish and still feel like you're not doing enough. You can become successful and still feel unsuccessful. And eventually, that pressure can turn into a cycle. Work harder. Tour more, make more music, make more money, prove yourself again, and again, and again, until your body finally says, asterisk, asterisk, enough. Asterisk, asterisk. Ironically, YoungBoy's own advice during this interview may explain exactly what he needs to do himself. He talked about knowing when you're putting too much effort into something. He said you have to know when to give more effort and when to give less. That's a powerful statement, because sometimes knowing when to stop isn't weakness, sometimes it's wisdom. And that's especially true when we're talking about your health. The public often sees NBA YoungBoy as this larger-than-life figure, the rapper, the superstar, the controversial artist, the person who seemingly doesn't care what anybody thinks. But this interview showed something different. We saw a father, a son, a grandson, someone thinking about his future, someone talking about wanting peace, someone talking about helping people, someone talking about stepping away from music. And now we know that, at least according to his own account, there was also a point where his physical health became something he couldn't simply ignore. That makes the conversation much bigger than music. And there's an important distinction here. We shouldn't pretend we know YoungBoy's exact medical condition from one interview. Swollen or enlarged doesn't tell us enough to diagnose anything. We don't know the underlying cause, how serious it was, what treatment he received, or what his current medical status is. So this isn't about diagnosing NBA YoungBoy. It's about listening to what asterisk asterisk he himself said asterisk asterisk. And what he said should make people stop and think. NBA YoungBoy built his career by refusing to stop, but maybe the next chapter of his life requires him to learn something completely different. Asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes you have to stop. Stop working. Stop touring. Stop trying to prove something. Stop carrying everything yourself. Stop pretending you're fine when you're not. Because success means very little if you don't get the opportunity to enjoy the life you worked so hard to create. And when YoungBoy talks about his children, that becomes even more important. His kids don't need another album more than they need their father. They don't need another tour more than they need him healthy. They don't need another record-breaking moment. They need him alive, present, and able to be there. NBA YoungBoy has spent years proving how much he can endure. But perhaps the real test now isn't how much pain he can survive. Maybe it's whether he can finally learn when asterisk, asterisk, not asterisk, asterisk, to push through it. Because there's a difference between being strong enough to keep going and being wise enough to know when you need to stop. The heart revelation from this interview shouldn't be treated as gossip. It should be treated as a reminder that behind the superstar is a human being, a father, a son, and a young man who still has a lot of life ahead of him. So the question isn't, can NBA YoungBoy keep going? We already know he can. The real question is, will he give himself permission to slow down before his body forces him to? And honestly, that may be the most important decision of his entire career. What do you think? Do you believe YoungBoy needs to step away from music and focus more on his health and family? Or do you think he's capable of balancing both? Let me know what you think in the comments.